to Canyon Professional Development's Wednesday webinar brought to you by Grand Canyon University. Folks, I don't want to forget to let you know to connect with us on social media. We've got our QR codes out there to make sure that you know we've got tips, tricks, freebies, either in person at the university or online. So connect today. But I'll tell you what, today our Wednesday webinar is incredible. We have a lineup for you with an associate professor of design here at Grand Canyon University. Chris Murphy is a senior design strategist and has so much more to offer than just the design strategy piece. You're going to learn a lot. I'm going to learn a lot. So let me introduce our esteemed guest, Professor Chris Murphy. You are an associate dean or associate professor of design here, and you have so many areas of focus. So folks, if you check that out, from interface design, portfolio, all kinds of experience, let's just jump into our topic today, which is all about UX, UI basics.
Yeah, sounds good.
Chris, so first of all, a lot of our audience, K-12 teachers, administrators, technology supporters, they may not know what UX UI is, and yet I think we use it every single day. And I think that it's under delivered in our K-12 classrooms. So knowing that, start us off into the basics, and then I'll be the friendly interrupter sometimes when I just have a question. It's okay.
No, that sounds good. And I use this example up here, this metaphor of a iceberg to illustrate the idea of what UX and UI is. And really, we start with the UX first, which refers to the overall experience a user has when interacting with a product or service. And then user interface is actually the point of the interaction between the user and the digital device or product. So the UI is normally what we see, but there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that actually get us to making that application on your phone or some kind of a website or something like that.
So
And
let's go back just a second, because I think some of our audience members may not know what you mean by user, because are the users
sure.
always people, or are we, and now we're in the age of AI, are users robots? Can you explain why we call it user interface, user design?
Yeah, user is the person that's interacting with the object that you're creating. So we often refer to applications and we call them products. And so products, when someone is designing for them, they are always keeping the idea of who is the main user that's going to be using that particular product. And throughout this presentation, I'm going to talk about how to navigate who are your users and how to create personas that define who your users are. Because when you know your user, or you know the person that you're trying to design for, it makes it a lot easier to actually hit the mark. It's not about your own personal aesthetic or your own personal style or any of that. It's not about your own personal experience sometimes. It's really more about what is the user's experience that you really want to focus on.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. I think that's
Oh,
important.
absolutely. I agree. No, and a lot of this it really is about very much about the user. And so I want to just kind of go over, like, there's different jobs in this field, but they're very interconnected because you'll see job postings, you'll see these things all the time. And so the first one is a UX designer. UX designers conduct user research, create personas, user flows, wireframes, and wireframes are, think of a wireframe like a blueprint to a building. Okay, and it's like a blueprint to a website, or it's a blueprint to an application on your phone. And they also build prototypes, conduct usability testing, and they also have to factor in accessibility for the user as well. And they need to stay up with UX trends. I just threw this up here too. And in terms of salaries right now, it's a really hot field to be in. I mean, entry level for UX designers at $60K at the moment, and I mean. And juniors getting to that, almost that six-figure salary range, and so on. So it's pretty impressive.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and when I think of UX design, I often think of Don Norman, who happens to be known as the father of user experience. Uh, Don Norman wrote this book called The Design of Everyday Things, which is like a must read. And he talks about how, and one of his quotes from that book is, design is really an act of communication, which means having a deep understanding of the person with whom the designer is communicating, which brings me to probably the most important term that you will ever hear when it comes to understanding this field, is called empathy. And it's not the same as sympathy. It doesn't mean you're sympathetic to the person. It means that you can relate to the person, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. It's really important that you dive into that user and you understand who they are. It's
I
just really
can't
critical.
express to you how amazing this is because it connects directly with K-12 teaching, learning,
Mhm.
leading. I mean, ultimately, we have to be empathetic with our students, and understand where they're coming from because so many do not have our background. So thank you for starting out with empathy.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, honestly, it's where I start everything I do, and everything I think about is how am I, how is it affecting the person that I have to make this presentation for, or this email, or what have you. Like I have to always keep that in mind as I'm writing something for them. And then you have UI designer. If we break these two different jobs out, UI designers are that tip of that iceberg. They're focused on the aesthetics of that product. So they're designing the visual elements. They're ensuring consistency across different platforms. So you may have a phone, a watch that has UI on it. You may have a phone that has the same kind of UI on it, and it might be tied to some sort of other product that's out there as well. Implementing the branding guidelines from that particular brand, and then optimizing designs for responsiveness, because designs have to be, now in this world of like every device under the sun is created. I mean, we have folding phones, we have everything. At this point, we have to always think about how we're designing for responsiveness. And then we develop interactive prototyping and stay up on design trends, as well as utilizing tools and software, which I'll talk about later on in my presentation as well. And then you've got a UX and UI designer combo. Okay. And when I think about the university here and what we teach most of the time, it's really this. This is what we're really getting into. And what it allows is allow students to say as they leave here, I really want to focus on being a UX designer only, or I want to focus on being a UI designer only. Or, and usually when you think of UX and UI designer, honestly, that those two different job roles, when they're just so set, when they're segmented into those two different parts, really are only happening at major, really very large corporations that can, or something with like a single product that they're working on, one application, and that's their focus. So they can segment those out. Most companies need you to do both. So we definitely go over both of those, and the same
so,
kind of concepts are applied there.
and I know this is really high level, but I see so
Mhm.
much, I mean, our audience may not be as familiar with the word prototype, may not be as
Mhm.
familiar with optimized designs for responsiveness. I mean, that to me, I'm not really sure what that means. So in a nutshell,
Sure.
give us as an educator, how might I use a UI or UX concept in my classroom?
Yeah, let's take a simple concept of, most kids are probably used to having a phone,
Oh
and
yeah,
you know
more than
I
one.
mean, right, exactly. So there's a mobile design for it, and then that size has to get bigger. Let's say they are at home and they have a tablet, and if they look at that website on a tablet, it has to be reformatted for that tablet size. And then as it gets larger, it has to be reformatted for a desktop screen, so like on a laptop or some sort of display. If it's, let's say it's for a television, then the television has a different format to it. So when we think of responsive designs, we're thinking about how a design goes from one area of completion down to, gets pulled through different multiple sizes and so on.
Got it.
And in just one more thing to responsiveness, then there's different types of devices. When you think about like an Apple Watch, for example, you can't fit a whole website onto an Apple Watch, or a whole application sometimes onto an Apple Watch. So
Sure.
maybe part of the responsiveness of it is limiting features that you would normally have on the application, and just showing what a user needs just for the watch. Because they're not going to spend their time on here that much. It's mostly about data capturing and then submitting that data to the bigger application. So sometimes responsiveness can also be a limiting of features as well.
So the UX then is this design of user flows and wireframes, large vocabulary.
Correct.
That means we got to get it from the watch to the phone to the tablet
Absolutely.
to the computer.
And as you can imagine, this is pretty complicated, right? Like, I mean, that's a lot of moving parts and everything. So why when I say wireframing and prototyping, those are usually done in a like mid fidelity, which is just like gray boxes, some text, very simple structure and build out. And think of it like, why do we make a blueprint for a house? We make the blueprint for a house so we can start to plan where we're going to start to actually build everything, because nobody says, yeah, let's just go get some lumber and we'll just start throwing some stuff up here. And then, but we forgot to make the foundation. So now we got to tear the lumber apart.
I bet a lot of students do that when they first start writing a paper or when they first start to create something. So what you're saying is, in the field of UX and UI, you must have a blueprint. And in your field,
absolutely,
what's that blueprint called?
Oh, it's called a wireframe.
Thank you. Okay,
yeah.
so
no, that's no problem.
Okay, go ahead and continue. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, sure.
To make sure that it's
no.
We're just touching the surface here, but I wanted to make sure that it was really clear for our audience.
No, absolutely, absolutely. No, it can be very confusing. And then and then it all starts with the user. And I just want to really just emphasize that as well. And so that's why that iceberg, that it tends to be bigger on the bottom, because there's a lot of you have to do a lot of research to focus on it. And so what I want to take you through here today was a hypothetical. Okay. And let's just say your user has a messy problem. Cake is really hard to eat while it's on the move. All right. And everything we do has some sort of issue that you're trying to solve for. That's the best thing I can always tell. When I talk to students, I'm like, we're in the solving problems business. And so, it's always, let's define the problem and let's figure out some kind of a solution to it. And so in order to do that, we have to also kind of understand that problem. That ties back into the empathy. So we need to do some kind of research. Why historically cake is not a popular on-the-go food? That's the question I'm asking myself. Well, let's interview different user groups and develop different personas and user stories that can talk about that. And when I talk about user groups, yes, they could be focus groups. You can get a whole group of people together and you could ask them those questions, or it could be a simple one-on-one sit down with somebody and you're preparing a set of questions. And this is you taking empathy and tying that into understanding your user better. And then when you have all that information, you define that user. And we do that through something called personas. And so, for example, if I were to research, let's say, maybe 3 or 4 women, and I was getting that particular gender and that particular group of people, I would kind of combine them together to sort of say they all were saying the same type of things here. So they're all a busy mother. Their name, let's say, we'll make it up. It's Sarah Mitchell. She's 35 years old. She's a full-time mom. She's located in a suburban neighborhood. She's busy, right? Maybe she's got a job or she's focusing on the home, but it doesn't matter. You're a full-time mom. You're still busy. Sarah is dedicated mother of 3 energetic children, ages 4, 6, and 8. Her days are filled with managing household chores, running errands, driving her kids to school, activities, and play dates. Sarah loves baking and enjoys treating her family to homemade desserts, but she also values cleanliness and order in the home. Don't we all? Pain points with cake. It's really messy to clean up. Sarah gets tired of the mess and serving it. It's inconvenient for on the go. It's hard to take cake and put it in a car with a kid if you're trying to get home for nap time and, they're at a party. And so then, the kid's frustration, it's the classic, they drop the cake on the floor, but there's no more cake. And now the kid is crying and you're dealing with that. And then stains and spills. Okay. It gets everywhere. It stains the clothing. And then you spend more time washing it. And so that's me figuring out, okay, who she is, what is the things that she is having, what's her pain points. And then, this quote from her, and again, this is all hypothetical and made up right now, but I love baking for my kids, but cake always ends up making a huge mess. It's frustrating having to clean up frosting and crumbs all over the place. I need a treat that's less messy and easier for them to eat. And so the solution for Emma is Emma needs a convenient, less messy alternative that provides the same satisfaction as cake, but is easier for her kids to handle and enjoy without creating extra work for her.
So what
And
you're doing is you're saying to your user, let me get to know you. And you have to take
correct,
that time to get to know them, to create that relationship with them, to be able to hear them open up. And then once they open up and tell you how messy cake is and how,
right,
they go, oh yeah, I was in the minivan yesterday and this was a mess and I had all these kids but you have to cut through all that to get to the solution. So I have a feeling you're going to
correct.
tell me what you got here. Show me the
Yeah,
solution.
absolutely. And by the way, I'm not taking claim to the solution. This is a solution that's been around for a while. But it's just so again, it's all hypothetical. But let's say like, so I'm thinking like, okay, well, what's a great way to eat cake? It's not with your hand; it's obviously with a fork, and you put it in there, and then it's stable, right? It's in your fork, and it's pretty good, like we see here. But then it's also like, how do we make it portable for kids, and how to make it fun for kids, and where maybe it's not about getting a big piece of cake, but it's just about a cake. And if it's fun in a fun sized way, and then I'm thinking to myself, well, lollipops are fun. Kids love lollipops. It's a great thing to eat. So what if maybe we made a prototype, and this would be like us creating a wireframe. And if thinking about a website, it'd be like us creating a wireframe and then us like showing some kind of motion with that and how that works. And here we built our prototype cake pop basically. And now we're going to conduct some usability testing on that. Okay, great. We can hold it. It actually works, but it doesn't have much flavor to it. So maybe we need to like doctor it up a little bit. And so that's where now, so now we've done the UX part, right? That's the UX. It's like, here we've got this messy kid trying to take a piece of cake and shove it in his mouth. However, what we really want to do now is start to think about the UI. We want to start thinking about how to make that particular cake pop more enticing than another cake pop. And then we get into just thinking to ourselves, well, we could also make using different kinds of sticks. We can use different types of shapes and colors and different things like that. And so now all of a sudden what you're getting is the user interface. And keep in mind, the user interface is not just about making it look pretty. The user interface is also, you think about it from a brand positioning perspective, it's trying to make sure that this brand stands out versus another brand's product because they all can be very much the same, which
Because in my
leads me
head, I'm
to,
going directly to Starbucks cake pop, right? Because
yeah, exactly.
on the go, they've got a cake pop. Okay, this makes Starbucks stand out. So I'm not going to go to McDonald's because they don't have the easy to eat thing. They,
Right.
then comes in the competition. So okay, I'm excited. Keep going. So UX.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so I like to say is like good UX is good UI and good UI is good UX. In other words, if your UX is amazing and it's flawless, but your user interface is poorly constructed, we've all experienced this. We've been to a website where you couldn't find the call to action button to submit something, or you submitted it and then the form didn't show you a loading or something that said it was processing, things like of that nature. And then the same thing with UI. It could be the most beautiful app in the world. However, if the user experience is really poor, the audience member is just going to have a really frustrating time with it.
Hmm. Boy, I have a lot of questions about websites now that you made that statement. And I think that a lot of teachers, for example, or educators, I often will go to a website of the school district and I'll say, okay, so here's the school district, here's the school. Does this website represent your culture? And they often will say, no, because that's the district site, or it's really hard to get to where I want to go. So I have a lot of questions about web design, but perhaps we control what we can control in our classroom. So from a teaching standpoint, how do you take UX as good UI and vice versa to an instructor?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And so in my next example, I'm going to go through a student example of one of my students who for his new technology class and what he created.